Today's conversation is with Steve Foster, an entrepreneur who is a living example of resilience, innovation, and integrity. Steve's journey is one you will not want to miss. From being homeless at 16 to serving as a police officer to now owning or advising more than 15 companies, he's built and exited industry-leading businesses like Business Controls, which was the largest undercover investigation firm in the United States, and Conversant, a global leader in ethics and compliance software. But what truly sets Steve apart isn't just his achievements, it's his authenticity, his generosity, and genuine care for the people around him. In this interview, we explore his remarkable path and the personal and leadership lessons he's learned along the way. So, Steve, you currently, I think, have no less than 8 things on your LinkedIn profile about what you're involved in. But I wanted to go back, and we'll get to those, but I wanted to go back first where you and I sort of started to engage. It was 2009, correct me if I'm wrong. You were in the throes of running Business Controls, and you were looking at bringing on partners, which ended up turning into Conversant, and then it went from there. Could you talk a little bit about starting Business Controls and then how you decided to grow it and then eventually exit?
Well, Business Controls didn't start off as a tech company. Business Controls at one point became the largest corporate undercover investigation firm in the country. And so, having been a police officer, and I focused mostly on street crimes, vice level crimes, and intel was probably the thing that drew me to that kind of work was just understanding information about the people that we were coming in contact with that were involved at that level of street crimes. Well, what I learned as a police officer was drugs are rampant throughout corporate America. I mean, you can't get into corporate America unless you have a warrant. You can't do the things you need to do, and a lot of businesses really need to get that cleaned up. And so I started a consulting company called Business Controls with my partner that became the largest corporate investigation firm in the country and mostly focused on undercover investigations. And so through that process, I was learning a lot about businesses, and we had a hotline system called MySafe Workplace. And we felt like the hotline would be a great way for us to get information about what was happening inside of companies. And so I wanted the hotline system to be instantaneous, and I wanted it to be anonymous. Hotline systems back in the day were a telephone number to a voicemail that nobody ever picked up the phone. Every once in a while, HR would go, "Hey, there's a voicemail right there. We didn't listen to this, and it's from 3 weeks ago." And so MySafe Workplace was born. It became instantaneous, and I was able to build the technology to anonymize who was making the information or who was providing the information. And I actually got the patent. And as we started growing and gathering data and information about really what was happening inside of these companies, it became really obvious that there was more here from an intelligence or a data collection standpoint to help these companies really get out in front of some of the problems they were having. And so we started realizing that the software was probably more valuable than the investigations were. And at the same time, we're realizing these investigations are so expensive and they're so fraught with liability and risk because we literally would place investigators in undercover in corporate America, and they would have jobs. They would work in a role, and the only person who knew that they were undercover was usually the executive that hired us and the general counsel. And these are big, multinational conglomerates.
Hey, what is this, like early 2000s? Give me a time frame.
Yeah.
Okay.
We started the company. We launched the company in 2001 timeframe. And so we evolved it, and really we got rid of the investigations as the time frame right around when I was meeting you. When I met you, we were really shedding all the investigations and really leaning into the hotline systems at the time, and it really evolved. And I realized that we had to shed that business. So I had a partner. I gave him all the investigative and consulting business, and I took the technology business. And we transitioned to Business Controls to become Conversant. We had about 500 customers at that point in time. We were getting a lot of attention from Microsoft. We actually won a Global Microsoft Technology of the Year award in 2005. Subsequently, Bill Gates personally ended up putting about $20 million into the business. And so we became that evolved into what became one of the second largest ethics and compliance software company. We were the largest in the US, second largest in the world behind Navex. And Navex actually tried to buy us. They were at one point in time a Vista company. And so it evolved over a period of time. And it was really trying to stay with business, to break from the business that we had originally built, and to go towards more of a technology business that would be more of a data organization, and get out of the investigative work.
Yeah. So can I just ask a couple of clarifying questions there before you go into the other stuff on the partnership? Like a lot of times partnerships can get messy, right, when it ends. And I don't want to poke any holes here, but how did you navigate the split? I mean, was it a fairly natural split because your partner wanted to go do the investigations and you were interested in technology, or any pitfalls or advice for somebody else that's dissolving a partnership?
Yeah. Our partnership split started off really well at first. One of the reasons why I wanted to get out of business with my former partner is I felt personally that he was not very responsible from a financial perspective, and that was hurting us. And the split was okay. And we gave him a about a $1.5 million line of business, and we documented the whole thing. And we gave him a 3-year contract. On top of that, said, we'll pay you a fixed salary and pay all your benefits and all those things for 3 years. And that contract would sunset at the end of those 3 years. And then you're on your own. You got to figure out how to go make your own way in life and make your own money. Now, he still kept his ownership in the business, his equity in the business. But he wasn't going to be involved in decision making. He wasn't going to be on the board. He wasn't going to be an operator in the business. So you fast forward to the end of those 3 years, and he did not do what he said he was going to do. He didn't go build a business for himself. And he saw that we were building a really good business. And so he wanted us to continue to pay him out of that business. And that's when it all fell apart. And so when our lawyers told him, you have a contract, and you don't have a claim. Well, he still sued us, right? He sued us, and it ended up in federal court. And as an ethics and compliance company, we were like, we got to defend ourselves, right? Because we can't have our reputation ruined. But the thing that really helped us was having good lawyers, documenting everything, really keeping track of that relationship and all the ins and outs of that relationship through the documentation over the years. And quite frankly, he lost in the lawsuit. I think the jury took 17 minutes to come back in federal court to fine for Conversant. His claims were all refuted, and as a matter of fact, he had to pay our legal fees. So,
Yeah.
And we tried to negotiate with him and buy him out, over the years, because nobody wants to be in litigation. But if you have a partnership, you have to secure that partnership with the right documentation. And I didn't do that initially when I first started partnering with him, because I didn't understand. I was a street cop, and I went out and built a network where I could get really good advice. A lot of times what I see is entrepreneurs, they will build a network of people that can buy from them. That's what they pursue. And they never prepare for the inevitable risks that businesses present. And they don't build their network on the other side of service providers or friends who can give you good guidance and good advice, who actually aren't just your neighbor who is a lawyer, but he's general counsel at a title company, and all he does is contract law all day long, right? He doesn't understand business law.
Yeah.
And so I really spent a lot of time, as building my network out. And that's been the single greatest thing to help me understand what I didn't understand. And I started my business. I didn't have my undergraduate. When we graduated Leadership Denver together, I had just finished my undergraduate degree. I graduated on my 40th birthday. I received my diploma, and then I went on to get some graduate courses as well. But I didn't know what I didn't know, and so I needed to have people around me to help me at that point. And I was able to build a network of folks who helped me put ourselves in a really good position, both to run the company and to overcome some of those threats and obstacles to the business, but to also help me understand what's next for me.
Yeah. Now, when we were working together, it was you, and then you were bringing on new partners to create Conversant. Can you talk about how did you go about finding them? Is this part of the network? Is this part of what you're
Or
just
the
speaking
network.
to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Had Travis Webb, senior executive at BKD, he's a leadership Denver grad. Travis and I became really good friends because, you need an accounting firm. They weren't an accounting firm that we were going to use, but Travis and I made a great relationship. And so I started realizing the limitations of my skill set and said, I got to go find an executive or a team of executives that have done this before. And, what better place than to go to a senior partner at an accounting firm that's a national accounting firm to tell me who were the software company executives in Colorado that were really killing it, thinking that I would go meet with them and I could, find some folks maybe in their networks. And it just so happened that, one of their best clients was a software company called Rivet Software. And so through an introduction with the executive team at Rivet Software and multiple conversations, what I wanted to do aligned with what they wanted to do beyond Rivet. And so I hired the entire freaking executive team. I hired everybody.
True Steve style, just all in, right?
So I hired them all. And the agreement was, and I needed to understand, part of the problem that I have, I shouldn't say it that way, it's too strong. Part of the struggle that I see is entrepreneurs thinking that they can solve it all themselves and not really building good relationships and knowing when you don't know, right? Because we all know, you know, you don't know, you don't know, you don't know. And I knew there was so much that I didn't know. And I knew I needed to raise capital. So I went and found someone that I could trust and partner with that came in through the network. And I moved from CEO to president. And I sat alongside that executive team for a year to teach them the business. And then I moved as part of my exit strategy because I wanted to learn how to build a company, not only from the inside, but from the board. And I moved to the board of directors. And we brought in some really great, we raised almost $80 million in capital into that business. And we brought in some great investment firms that just taught me so much. And so I knew what I didn't know and I needed to find a way to learn it. And so my plan was that year was to figure out how to get to the next level by, by, by bringing in people who could teach me how to get to the next level. And so that was very helpful for me from that standpoint.
You have a really great balance of both confidence and enthusiasm and humility around knowing what you don't know, right? I mean, there's so many entrepreneurs who you need a certain level of confidence to be an entrepreneur, right? Taking huge risks. But at the same time, that I often see it tip too far, and that either they're working in the business and don't have time to ask for help or go find help, or just don't want to. Did you have mentors or people telling you go find help?
I've been very blessed with fantastic mentors. And so one of my mentors was a guy by the name of Scott Johnson, and he was a senior executive leader at Microsoft. And Scott brought me into his office in 2004, 2005 and said, I want you to read this book. And I was like, okay, great. And he was like, I don't know a successful executive that hasn't read this book. And the book is called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And some people may look at the book and go, that's old or whatever, but it spoke to me. Right. And what I realized was being a police officer, you're constantly training and learning different ways to do things to keep yourself alive. Right. So you bake that habit into you. And I started doing that, in the workspace. And so that book was really the catalyst for me to read a multitude of books and to really go, well, this book leads me to this book and this book leads me to that book. And then started having better conversations with mentors. But, I did get a mentor in early, and which actually resulted in multiple mentors, that I could go, hey, I don't know what the hell I'm doing here. Can you give me some guidance or advice? And the best mentors I had didn't tell me what to do. They talked through with me what the options could be. Right. And, you have to match your skill set. I call it the ceiling of complexity. You have to be constantly bumping up against your ceiling of complexity and seeing if you can move it up, right? If you can really grow it. But then I realized that it's not about me, right? It was about everybody else that got me here. And it was about the people that I was hiring and the people I was surrounding myself with, that could be honest with me, that could cheer along for my victories, that could wipe my tears for my failures, and then kick me in the ass and tell me to get back at it. And so it became less the more I learned, it became less about what else I needed to learn and more about who I had.
That's good. And I want to get to some of the heart-led leadership things you've done. But before we go there, I want to finish this sort of journey with Conversant, which then you ended up selling to OneTrust. So, and you mentioned your own personal exit strategy. Just talk me through your thinking and what your needs were. Because I think I know you were also having at least one side business going on at the same time, right? So are you thinking like, okay, I'm going to get out of this. This has run its course and I'm going to go do these things? Or was it just learn as much as I can? And just walk us through that process for you.
This is going to sound silly, but it was very intentional. My grandfather was a very important person in my life. I think maybe you don't, but I came up very rough. I was homeless at 16. My brother didn't survive it. My sister was killed when she was 12 and I was 11. Came up very rough, but my grandfather knew everybody in the neighborhood, and he called it wiring the neighborhood. And so I've given a couple of speeches about this from that standpoint. But it was really, I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but it was really important for me to wire up the neighborhood in a way that I had not only friends that could cheer for me, but the goal was and I kept this goal, I still have this goal today. If I can help as many people that help me, if I can help as many people as humanly possible, when I am successful, I will have a whole lot of people in the audience cheer when I get my chance to stand up on the stage. And I never lost sight of it. And I didn't build the audience in that dream of mine through the successes that I was having. I was building the audience through helping other people as best I could be successful. And so it was about getting a big enough group of people that I could make introductions for folks. And what that led to was a multitude of opportunity for me, because everybody was like, I don't know anybody in this town that knows as many people as you do. I'm like, okay, well, that doesn't bring me value. They're like, no, it does, right? Because people take your phone call and you can ask people questions that we just can't ask them. So I remember having a conversation with one of my advisors, Nancy Phillips, who's brilliant. She sold her company for almost $2 billion. And I said, Nance, what should I do? And she said, well, you should start charging people for your advice. And we argued about this like 15 years later, that I was like, this company is your fault. She was like, I didn't tell you to start a company. I told you to charge people. I'm like, that's a company, right? And now Nancy comes to me all the time for, hey, I need to meet this person or I need to meet that person. And so it led to me really meeting a lot of folks that were not only looking for a confidant, a mentor, a friend, a peer to talk with about some of the challenges they were dealing with, but it really led to me understanding how companies are built and what goes into really structuring a strategy and assembling a team and capitalizing a business. And that just kept growing. And honestly, it was so much fun that I didn't want to stop. And so that's why, Connect13 is the one company that has stayed constant since 2006 or 2008, I think it started, because people hire me because of my network a lot of times early on, but now they're hiring me because you couple the network with the knowledge and the experience, and it becomes pretty powerful. And so I've got a lot of folks that will call me up and say, hey, would you come in and help us think through this problem set? And that always evolves to, hey, would you join our board? Hey, would you be an advisor to us? Or, hey, we're looking for a new CEO. Would you come in? Or would you recommend somebody? And so that's got me. I mean, I think my wife and I now own equity in about 15 or 18 companies in Colorado. And some of them are going to do really well. And some of them are going to not do really well. It really comes back to, no matter what business you're in now, I love software and services, but it really comes down to the people in the business, and how do you build relationships, create alignment, drive some focus and discipline into that business. But it always comes down to the people. And that, frankly, started off as when I went to my grandfather's funeral, it was the worst day of my life. I think I was 21, 22 years old. My daughter, who's 39 now and is a CEO, was a baby. And I brought her with me to that funeral. And I remember what we call standing on line at that funeral parlor with my brother and my mother and my uncle. Very Italian family. My grandfather was a mob guy, kind of involved. He wasn't a hardcore mob guy, but he was involved with a lot of bad people. Boy, I tell you what, everybody in the neighborhood, I mean, it was 4 hours of meeting people and shaking hands. And I was like, man, if I could have a funeral like that, if I could have success like that, where people care that much and it was always, every single one walked by and said, your grandfather did this for me. Your grandfather did that for me. Your grandfather was so sweet when I was having this problem. Your grandfather was always there for the neighborhood. And I thought that's who I would be, and that really helped me grow the neighborhood, wire the neighborhood up. But it also led me into a lot of opportunities that I probably should have never been given. Right. I mean, I'm a knucklehead street kid who was homeless at 16. And I've sat down with presidents and had a president and had personal conversations with them. I mean, people look at the picture of me and Barack Obama sitting and having a conversation. I'm like, I got no business being in this room, but it was fun. Right. And I see a lot of entrepreneurs who struggle with, I can do this all versus I'm going to do this with a whole lot of people and have some fun doing it. So I don't know. It started off as a goal and it became more of a process. I guess I could use that word, but it became very intentional so that I don't have to worry about not knowing something, because I can call someone and say, I don't know how to do this. Can you help me understand how to do it? And that has helped me achieve so much success. That's pretty unbelievable. And that's what Connect was. Connecting is what I do. And 13 was my badge number. So I never wanted to forget where I came from. And so that I always want to remember, that scared kid who said, living in his car at 16, I can do this. I can figure this out. And I've always been that, scared kid trying to figure it out. But now I'm trying to help everybody else figure it out, or at least those that are in my life.
Yeah. I so badly want to talk about your grandfather being a light mobster and you being a cop, but I'm going to stay on point. I'm going to stay on topic.
Yeah, you think you're blown away by it. Talk about my family being blown away by it,
right? Exactly. Let's go ahead and so one thing, because you are so, you've done instruction at the Heart-Led Leadership Center for Heart-Led Leadership, if I'm getting that correct. I know just being in some of your companies, how much you do care about people. And how do you, and now you're on the Civic Commission, like making sure workforce is properly managed and hired and all that kind of stuff. So talk a little bit about how you take care of people in companies as an entrepreneur, as a leader, where you're balancing both the bottom line and then understanding that people are a huge part of that.
I think it's not so much that I take care of people. I think it's that I'm authentic with people and I'm vulnerable with people. And I'm very honest with them. I'm hiring you in because I don't know how to do this. And I need you to teach me or teach this company, or I need you to do this thing first. And then I give them the room to do that thing. And, I always end every meeting with every one of my executives or every one of my teammates. What do you need from me? What can I do right now that's going to help you finish, get to, think through whatever the thing is that you're working on right now? And I think that trust is a really big deal in any relationship. And I think it's the most important deal. Those CEOs, I've met a lot of them that I have a tremendous amount of respect for. And I met a lot of them that should be CEOs because they're arrogant. They're nasty. They're do as I say, not as I do. And I never wanted to be that. I saw that in law enforcement. And so what I think I do for the people that I get the opportunity to work with is just be who I am. It is what it is. When you're sitting in an executive team leadership meeting with me, you know exactly who I am. You don't have to guess about what I'm thinking. Sometimes I think out loud a little bit too much. And I've learned, when the CEO says something, everybody wants to do it.
Yeah.
But what I've told people in the interview process, and I've lived it because I've fired executives for doing it, is I am not the smartest guy in this room, meaning in the boardroom or in the executive room. And if you treat me like I am, if you tell me what you think I want to hear versus what you think I need to hear, I will fire you if I catch you doing it. Now, I will give you some, like, don't do that again. I can't make a
Right.
decision.
Some notice and
Well,
counsel. Yeah.
I've had those conversations, but I have fired executives before because I'm like, you just keep trying to figure out what I want to hear. I want you to tell me what we're dealing with so that we can all fix it together, right? Especially when there's a problem set. And so I think, authenticity and vulnerability is really huge. I mean, I walk into a room and I'm a cop with a bunch of badges and medals and all that stuff. I've been in gunfights and everybody's like, oh my God, don't piss this guy off. And then they realize, holy shit, this guy's not, he's not that guy, and most people are like, you were a cop? I just don't get it. I'm like, my kid's a hero. My kid, has received a national tactical team award and the Medal of Valor in the last 6 months, two big giant awards for being a hero police officer. And, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what resume I bring into that room. It matters how I treat the people in that room. I could be the most experienced and successful entrepreneur that's ever existed. But if I treat everybody like shit, we're never going to get anything done, right? Because nothing happens without people doing things. No one person is successful by themselves. And frankly, I like people. So I want to have people that I can laugh with. And because I always tell them, look, this is going to be hard enough. Let's at least try to have some fun. And I think that gives people the confidence to make good decisions, or at least take a chance at making a really good decision. And knowing that I want you to make decisions and you don't have to be right. You just have to make a decision. And if you make a decision and we're wrong, then we'll fix it. We'll figure it out. If you make it, we always talk about intent counts more than technique. What was the intent in what you were trying to do? And maybe you used the wrong technique, but the intent was there. And I can work with somebody who has the right intent. I can't work with somebody who doesn't.
I love that approach. I wish there was more of it. There is a lot of fear culture, I think, at work. I'm just curious if you notice any difference between people you hire from other entrepreneurial small firms versus like a corporation. Like, is there more or less fear, or is it just more like individuals' experience in the past of being wrong and punished for it?
Yeah, I think that there are some people out there that come from bigger companies that want to go to smaller companies because they want to have a little bit more freedom to be able to make decisions, right? People want to be involved in the solution set. They don't want to be told what the solution set's going to be, right? They want to be creative. Yes, I mean, everybody comes with their own set of experiences. I don't think that there's any person that I talk to that comes from a very big company. Sometimes you got to break bad habits, right? But I think if a person comes into a opportunity open to learning and open to connecting with their fellow peers in that business or the people in that business, I think that's the people that I want around, right? But if somebody comes in and says, well, I've been there and done that before, and offers that as experience to not step on a landmine, that's great. But if they come in and say, I've been there, done that before, and here's what you will do, that shuts everybody off.
Yeah.
And from my perspective, I've never been afraid of failing. I lived in a car for a year, right? And so for me, it was like, how bad could it be? What are they going to do? Take my birthday from me? I've been shot at. I mean, so what are they going to do? Right? How bad could it be? And so, it really is about people, and it's what how they're willing to engage in the relationship. That's important.
If we think about the people and, exits, so somebody's buying one company, one culture is buying another culture. How do you, either as Conversant selling to one trust or as you're advising so many different companies, how do you make sure the people are taken care of, that it's a culture fit, or are you?
That's a really hard thing. The thing that I think in my limited experience, I think the thing that when M&A happens, I think the biggest reason for it to fail is culture. When two cultures that are diametrically opposed or don't align and can't connect with each other, that's what causes the business to fail. And what I find is that people don't take enough time to think about, they may say, this is a great business fit. This is a great economics fit, but is this a good culture fit? They always think, well, we could figure that. And the folks that don't want to play along, we could just fire them. Right. And that's not how it works, because everybody's watching and everybody's waiting to see what we're going to do as leaders to help them either be successful in the new business or to help them be successful somewhere else. Being in vice narcotics or being in undercover investigations in corporate America, I've terminated probably north of 12,000 people. That's what we did, right? We caught all the bad people in the business and got rid of them. And my position has always been, listen, you can't stay here, but I'm going to help you be successful somewhere else. And here's my guidance. Here's how I'm going to help you do that. And here's what this could look like. But you got to take ownership in it. And so culture is a big deal. And I see M&As happen all the time where people did not take into consideration how much the culture of the two businesses would affect the outcomes that they were looking for.
Have you seen a good example of somebody taking over another company and the culture's actually, or the acquiring company doing a good job of integrating the new team and, taking those that fit the culture and supporting them and, kindly filtering out the others?
No, of course I mean, I've seen, it can be successful on both sides, right? We see it all throughout the markets of companies that have grown and through M&A and culturally have expanded through acquisition. And I see it all the time. And the challenge is not, I don't look, sometimes I do look at the ones that were successful. And a lot of people don't understand why they were successful. So they don't really dig into it. They go, we were successful, so let's not mess with anything. Right. I think you can learn a lot from failure and you can learn a lot from success, but you can be successful and not know why you were successful, but you can fail and absolutely know why you failed. Right. And so there's learnings in all, but yeah, of course there's, and I think it boils down to leadership. What is the leadership willing to do? Right.
Yeah.
I always ask, like I'm in the process of this right now with a company that we're trying to spin out of another big entity. And, I always ask really these 4 hard questions, and they're very simple questions, but I've never seen these 4 questions get executive teams twisted up 16 ways of Sunday. And it's, what do we do? I want them to articulate that to me. And then I say, okay, now what can we do? Right. And what do we want to do is the third question. And then I always follow up with, but what should we do? Right. And so, they seem very simple and very easy, but you get into an organization that's trying to merge 2 firms and ask them that question relative to people, and it gets them twisted up, right? They're like, oh, we didn't think of this. And this is more than we bargained for. And I'm like, yeah, but you'd rather ask those questions now, than ask them 6-8 months from now when you're middle and the building's on fire and you're like, now what do we do? I mean, you know me a little bit, so I'm a kind of a candid guy, but, I got married to my first wife after knowing her for 2 weeks. We thought that was going to fail. We were 18 years old. We ran away and got married. We didn't ask each other a single question because we didn't know there was a question to ask. Then I married my second wife after knowing her for about 3 months. And I thought, well, I've known her for 3 months. She seems okay. And I didn't ask her a single tough question. And that failed. And I spent a lot of time with Tammy, really having a lot of deep, intimate conversations about who we are, what we do, and where we're going. And I've got the greatest partner that I could ever ask for, Tammy. We've been together now 10 years and we've known each other for 20. But I only say that because people are not willing to be that authentic when it comes to a business that's run by people who have all kinds of feelings and desires, and they're scared of this or they're afraid of that, or I just bought this house. Oh, what am I going to do if I get let go? And you got to really get in there and connect with the people in a way that you would in your intimate relationships, and understand what motivates them and understand what their needs are and maybe you can't meet them, but at least you've met them there at that point, and they will have a hell of a lot more respect and trust in you, even if you have to let them go, than if you were just like, well, I don't want to talk to that person because that person's out there. Right.
I don't care to know you. I don't care to know your circumstances. Goodbye. Yeah. I want to, as we wind up, I have one question for you. So, I work with a lot of people who are in transition or exiting either from a business or retiring or whatnot. And, you've got so many fingers and so many pies. You're not slowing down anytime soon. And one thing I would love is a redefinition of retirement I know people who are writing books and still engaged in their 80s, well into their 80s. How do you think, I know you're CEO of a new company and you've got, you said the 15 that you're investing in. What do you see? How do you see yourself, going and riding into the sunset, whether you're still, a business owner or not, or.
The challenge that I have is people don't put a plan in place. What do you want to do? What do you want to do in 6 to 8 years? What do you want to do in, people think in increments of quarters, even in their own career. And I wanted to be a board. I wanted to bring my wisdom to companies because I was so impressed by some of the board members I had in my life. And so I intentionally started building relationships with not just the investment firms that invested in companies, but other firms, and really being a resource for them to, to help them if they needed to source some talent, or if they needed to meet some customer, or if they needed to work through some problem. And I really put myself into a position intentionally to start sitting on boards. And so what I want to do now, and frankly, I'm moving to a fractional role. I've gotten the company that I'm at now as a CEO to a point where they got a great team. It's, the family-owned business. And now I've got it staged and I'm like, okay, I'm moving to a fractional role as your executive advisor. Here's the keys to the car. Don't wreck it, right? We got this thing running. So as of December 1st, I move into a fractional role because part of me loves what I do, but part of me knows that there's a shelf life for me, right? And I love to build things. I love to build teams and get everything going and set it on its path, and then be there to help course correct through conversation or leadership or advisory. And that's what I want. I want to do board work and advisory work. So I've set myself up on that path. And now people know me more as a board member and an advisor than they ever did. And I use this word sparingly, but I manifested that shit. This is what I'm going to do. And I can tell you, when I was in the Air Force, I worked at Buckley, and I would drive by the Aurora Police Department's police academy every day. And every time I drive by it, not every day, but most days, I would look at that academy and I go, I'm going to be in that academy these days. I'm going to be there as a police officer for the city of Aurora. And I was. And I said, I'm going to be a board member for a private equity firm. And I just got appointed by Bow River, the largest private equity fund in the state of Colorado, to a board that they just bought. And now they're talking about, what else can I do for them? And so people have to have an understanding of where they're going and what they want to do. They may not know how to get there. And they may not have all the confidence in the world, but they can't let that stop. They just got to say, I'm going to do this and I'm going to figure out how. And they'll get there. They can dedicate themselves to it. So.
I know. And let the record show, I did not prompt you to say that, but part of my whole process is thinking 10 years ahead to make better decisions today so that you get there. You are landing your spot on the private equity board, right? To do that. You can't just be like, oh, I want to do that tomorrow necessarily. You've got to have that as a goal. Yeah.
And that's the problem I run into. And I don't mean to cut you off, Cindy, but come to me all the time and go, I want to get on a board. Can you recommend somebody that I can sit on their board? And I'm like, that's not how it happens. And they have all these paid organizations out there. You pay $75 a month and they'll put you on board seats. No, they don't. That's not how it happens. You have to build trust and experience, and you have to build a reputation, and you have to have. I get appointed to boards by people who know me, not people who never met me, right? Because a board seat is a very trusted position, especially with a institutional capital backed company. Really important, right? And so I built a relationship with those folks. I built a reputation that they can see and feel and is tangible. And I work on myself every day. Every day I get up at 4:30, 5 o'clock in the morning, and I'm reading something that may not be germane to what I'm dealing with today, but will help me maybe 6 months or 6 years from now. And so I'm constantly trying to understand and learn and read. And I can't tell you how many times I've been in meetings with some of my executives go, guys, I told you to read the book so-and-so 6 months ago. And they were like, yeah, we should have. And we didn't, because we didn't take the time to do it. I'm like, well, that's on you. It's not on me. You got to figure that out. Because when somebody cares enough and loves enough to tell me I should do something because it'll help my career, I'm sure in hell going to do it. Right. Yeah. Maybe I don't agree with it. Maybe I didn't like the book, but I did it. And I can always say, I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do. Right.
Right.
And
You at least have the knowledge to make your own opinion then, right? To say like that worked for me, or I'm going to let that go.
so
That's
I would
great.
tell these people, there's so many people out there that want to fall into something because of what they accomplished yesterday. And they're not going to fall into something. They've got to be intentional about it. And if they can't be intentional about it, the world's not going to bring it to you.
Right. So, Steve, just in a final, well, first of all, how can people find you if they want to connect with you and maybe hire you on your Connect13?
Yeah, Steve at connect13.co. It's pretty simple. I know I have a website out there. I haven't looked at it probably in about 4 years. Honestly,
You're too busy to look at it.
honestly, I'm leaving here and going to lunch with somebody who I mentored for a number of years. And he had a small company. It got acquired by a larger company. And in his conversations with those folks, that he said to the CEO asked him the question, well, tell me how you got here. And he said, well, I can tell you who helped me get here. And I have lunch with those guys in a half an hour because the CEO of that company is now trying to take his company to a bigger, to a bigger place. And so he wants to have lunch with me to see if I can come in and help those guys be advisors. And it really is about relationships and about people. And, the thing that I get frustrated with is people will tell you they'll do something and then they don't do it. I would rather have somebody tell me they can't or won't than to tell me they will and don't. And so one of the things I tell everybody that works for me is if you say you're going to do something, do it. And if you can't, tell me why. Let's figure out a different. And so I always want to be known for a guy who was upfront, said, I can do that, or I can't do that, but I know 3 people who can. So let me introduce you to them.
Yeah, that's great. I was going to ask you your 3 words of advice or short phrase of advice to any entrepreneur out there. I have a suspicion what it might be, but I'll let you say it.
Well, build relationships, network the hell out of who, wherever you can, meet people and say hello to people. It's difficult for a lot of people, right? It's really hard. But that's the thing that people like. It's the networker that's doing it for all the wrong reasons are the one that turns people off. It's the person who is unsure, but really put themselves out there. That's the person I look for, right? Because I want to help them get from here to there, like people help me. So you got to network, right? And you got to be intentional about what you want to do, right? You got to think about it in terms of years, not days, right? Where do you want to be? And if you really want to be there, then you're going to figure out how to do what you need to do to get there, right? And you're going to figure out who you need to talk to or learn from or connect with that can help you along that journey. So really be intentional and then lean in, right? And then, I know who I am. And people say that I have a lot of confidence maybe I do, but I have a lot of confidence in people and know who you are, right? Figure out who you are and what you're good at and what you're not good at. And don't be afraid of either one, right? Don't be afraid to say, I'm no good at this. My team knows, don't bring me an Excel spreadsheet. Don't ask me to build an Excel spreadsheet. Don't ask me to be detail oriented because I don't know how to do that. But I got a lot of people around me that are really freaking good at that. And I let them do what they do to become successful, and they help me be successful. So know who you are as a human being and lean into that, both the good and the bad, and you will be okay.
Perfect. Thank you so much for your time. Thanks for sharing your wisdom. We could have kept talking. I used to have so many questions still, but thank you so much for your time. And
it's I love doing these, and I've done them a couple of times for folks. Whatever I could do to help will be great.
Awesome. Steve, thanks so much.
All righty.